So, Andriy, what do you expect from these talks? Are we any closer to peace?
Well, I'm not hearing a lot of signs that either Washington or Ukraine are looking to have any big news today in Geneva or this week in particular. What we're specifically looking at is the fact that Russia has amped up its rhetoric by sending even more unqualified people to mess up the conversation. This is something that specifically the United States specifically did not want to have happen. We also have new voices coming in from the United States side, specifically, again, the Secretary of the Army, who earlier, some viewers might remember that he was dispatched in November of 2025 to give an ultimatum to President Zelenskyy about signing a deal by Thanksgiving, American holiday at the end of November, and once again he's back in the picture again. So it's not quite clear what's going to happen in Geneva. However, I believe that both the American and Ukrainian side would like to have the steady as she goes in terms of the conversation and not make any great news other than saying that the sides are continuing to talk. Until Russia is actually ready to seriously have a conversation, I don't believe there's any possibility to have a breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. If there's a final deal, what could actually look like and who guarantees it?
Well, the important thing is not just who guarantees it, but what are the mechanisms of guaranteeing it.
Yeah.
And that's where it's very important. This is where the conversation from the United States side always comes up about elections. From the Ukraine side, Ukraine very much wants a vote on this kind of agreement held at the United States Senate level. This is something that they have said, countered, saying that they could have their own parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, vote on an agreement or have a national referendum. And then we get into the conversations from the United States side saying, well, if you have a national referendum, why don't we just have presidential elections? Which is slightly different, because if you have presidential elections, first of all, we are not just having a ceasefire, but the war has finished because you cannot have a war during the election. And second of all, you can't order a presidential election to happen as soon as possible. There are weeks and months of planning for any kind of election that are written into the Ukrainian law of how many weeks in advance the candidate gives notice, how many weeks they have to prepare, where's the public financing. All of this stuff happens before any election. So there are many discussions happening about how to have this uchvalite in Ukrainian, but ratified in the United States Senate, and making sure that whatever agreement happens, it is not simply another signature like we had at the Budapest Memorandum of 1994.
Mm-hmm. They say elections require 60 days of full silence. Is that realistic?
Very much unrealistic to have national elections for a president or Verkhovna Rada or anything like that. I think the major thing is what kind of agreement can we get from the Ukrainian people as far as an agreement. So here we might have not this week, but at some point in the coming weeks or months, an agreement that came together through the trilateral talks. Let's say this actually comes to pass. And this agreement is then proposed to the Ukrainian people. If they are not in support of it, they will probably demand a national referendum as opposed to just allowing the national Verkhovna Rada, the parliament, to vote on it. So that's one thing from the Ukrainian side. On the American side, we also have to deal with the fact that by the time the summer ends in the United States, the senators are not going to be making votes in Congress. They're going to be thinking about their own reelection because a third of the Senate is up for reelection. So there's also time and the calendar to think about in terms of scheduling a vote.
Mm-hmm. More broadly, can Ukraine hold election in the next 2 or 3 months?
I don't think that some newspapers have mentioned May as a potential election. I think that would be too soon. It would be interesting to see what can happen during the summer. But again, all of this is reliant on the fact that there's a ceasefire. One, a ceasefire just to make things safe. Second of all, that's a question for Ukrainian scholars and the Ukrainian Supreme Court to figure out, what exactly is the end of the war, the end of the martial stance of the country to allow for elections which are banned under that kind of time of war. So is it simply a ceasefire? And then you can restart the time of war after the fact if Russia were to attack again. That's still up for debate in terms of what the rationale and the legal reasoning of the country needs to be to satisfy constitutional requirements.
Mm-hmm. This is the first time the Russia delegation is meeting on Europe venue. Why there, and does it matter?
Um, I think it's important that we have these conversations. It's important for Ukraine to demonstrate to the United States that they're willing to have these conversations. If it happens in Geneva, yes, it is a big deal that they're giving special dispensation for people with this criminal regime, with this dictatorship in Russia to travel to Geneva. However, we also know that Geneva, as the location of one of the United Nations departments, is also receptive to having international interlocutors from many different regimes, whether they're criminal regimes or part of the UN community. So we'll see what happens after the fact, but I think this is a good faith sign by Ukrainians not objecting to this, sitting down with America whenever America is ready to talk. It's simply the fact that the people that Russia is sending are, first of all, not qualified to make any agreements on behalf of the Russian dictator. They are rather low-ranking, and especially the new set of people who have been sent here, people like Medinsky and others, they are not people that the United States wants to see at a negotiation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe could Putin show up in Switzerland?
I don't think so, because, again, I've been fooled or tricked by the Alaska trip. I did not think he was going to fly to Alaska, but in that case, he did not have to fly over another country. I think he's literally scared about flying over other countries. It's one reason he didn't go to Istanbul. It's one reason he hasn't gone to other international gatherings, BRICS, or what have you. If he can go directly from Russia to China for the summit he had with Xi Jinping, okay, he'll do that. If he can fly across the Bering Sea to Alaska, he'll do that. But apart from that, I believe he's too scared to fly over another country.
So could the next meeting happen in Moscow?
Absolutely not. I think the only time a meeting's going to happen in Moscow is when we're prepared to have a war tribunal in Moscow. Other than that, there's really no need for any foreign diplomats to head there, given the fact that there's such a long history of war crimes happening under this regime. And if one country is expected to have an election, I certainly think that Ukraine should press for Russian elections at the same time.
Mm-hmm. We both know Putin is clearly dragging this out, but is Trump planning to do anything about it?
I don't really see President Trump as being really involved in these negotiations on a deep level. I think once he had his final meeting between the meeting with Zelenskyy at the United Nations in September of 25, and then inviting President Zelenskyy for the meeting at the White House in October, where we all believed there was going to be an agreement on Tomahawks. Once that last meeting in October happened, I really haven't seen any evidence of President Trump having a direct hand in these talks. Yes, he has talked to President Zelenskyy on phone as well as in person in Davos, and yes, he has spoken with the Russian dictator. But beyond that, he's not really involving himself. He is hoping that his people take care of it for him, which is why he keeps adding on to this delegation, not just Steve Witkoff now. Then he added Jared Kushner, and now he's added even more representatives from his government to try to make this happen, because at this point, it's an intractable situation with the enemy that keeps wanting to attack Ukraine, it seems, every day.
Mm-hmm. And they say India is buying less Russian oil. Does it actually weaken Russia?
Russia is absolutely enormously weakened. It's not just the price of oil that keeps falling. It's the fact that no investment is being made in drilling for more oil in Russia. Russian production of oil has gone down. There's simply no benefit for outside investors can't invest in Russia right now. If you're Chinese, perhaps, but they're just not seeing any benefit with the low price of global oil to produce more, which means that Russia is not selling as much. So in the end, Russia is down in production and in sales, and they're still fighting on. We know that they're trying to sell their reserves of currency and gold and other valuables to other countries that will buy them. But at some point, that economy is going to break. We've been saying this, of course, for many years now, understanding that the Russian economy has been propped up by private reserves. But at some point, those reserves will disappear, and the bonuses that are being signed to foreign mercenaries, as well as local Russians in the Far East to sign up for the military, those are going to keep dropping until the point that they're really not going to have an armed services.
Andriy, I know something changed behind you, and I know you were in Ukraine and received an awards. Could you show it and explain what it means?
Yeah, well, I was very honored to receive my Nahoroda. This is the Order of Merit Third Class that I received while I was in Kiev. I was very honored that the deputy head of the Office of the President, Serhiy Kislitsa, met with me at the Office of the President. And it's, for me, as somebody who doesn't serve on the front line, obviously, I'm very humbled to get an award. It is truly the heroes and heroines of Ukraine that deserve all the awards. But really, I accepted this with humility from Ambassador Kislitsa. On behalf of all of us who do work in the media outside of Ukraine, it's a small community of people that I know personally throughout the United States, but there are others in other countries constantly trying to introduce stories about Ukraine on media that's not based in Ukraine. And then, of course, it is my great honor to appear on Ukrainian media to try to explain what the best thoughts are from Americans to Ukrainians in Ukraine.
You were in Ukraine recently, and what was that experience like? Can you say more?
I was just, first of all, gratified to meet in person with a lot of my friends that I meet over Zoom, just like you and I meet every week, to not just speak in person with the hosts that I speak, but all the producers, journalists that I got to meet. I also met with heads of different NGOs, understanding what their mission is. And I mentioned the Office of the President, and I met with different government leaders as well. I just wanted to get as much of a sense as possible, squeezing in as many interviews and meetings every day, even with all the air raid alerts, the electricity failing from time to time, trying to make sure that I get as much information as possible, not only when I was on Zoom talking with American media back in America, but now that I'm back in America, to talk directly to the American people about what the experience there was, and also trying to convince as much as possible for more Americans, especially American government officials, to visit Ukraine.